And welcome in to this Saturday edition of the Fun Astrology and Merriman Market Analyst Financial Podcast. I'm Thomas Miller. We're recording this on March 16th for the week of March 18th, reading the free newsletter written at MMAcycles.com by financial analyst and amazing astrologer Ray Merriman. There's a lot of really good eclipse stuff in here. I know a lot of you have been interested in the eclipse and what it's going to do. Some of that take from Ray is coming up in just a few minutes. Let's get started, though, first of all, with a look at the markets from this week, and beginning with an article from the Wall Street Journal about gold. This was written back on March 11th. Quiet, stealthy, surprising. Gold prices are hitting record highs, and Wall Street analysts say they have been caught off guard. The precious metal is traditionally seen as a haven in times of volatility and geopolitical risk. But this time, its ascent is coinciding with investor optimism about the U.S. economy, which has sent riskier assets like stocks to new highs. Even Bitcoin has surged past its previous record." End quote. And then from the Wall Street Journal editorial board on March 12th, the overall spending numbers fly in the face of fiscal reality. Mr. Biden proposes spending $7.3 trillion in 2025, which is an increase of $1.1 trillion in 2 years. For those scoring at home, that's 18%. Mr. Biden's deficits mean that debt as a share of the economy also keeps rising. COVID spending by Donald Trump and Mr. Biden caused the debt to explode to levels not seen since the end of World War II. But unlike after the war, Mr. Biden is making no attempt to control the debt. This is a budget for a world that does not exist. End quote. Now, Ray's commentary, again available at MMAcycles.com. In the absence of any major planetary aspects this past week, financial markets that had been making new all-time highs started to pull back modestly. That doesn't mean that the Jupiter-Uranus Express, headed to its major destination on April 20th and 21st, has derailed. It just means that there is a pause, as Venus will first conjoin Saturn on March 21st, followed by a powerful solar eclipse, and Mars conjoining Saturn April 8th through the 10th. It may get a bit rocky short term, but the magnetic pull of Jupiter and Uranus is still poised to outweigh other cosmic forces. After all, there is probably no greater cosmic symbolism of a breakout to new all-time or multi-year highs than Jupiter interacting with Uranus. Uranus doesn't like restrictions, such as support and resistance, and is driven to break beyond them, where Jupiter likes to do things in a big, grandiose fashion. Those dynamics aren't over yet. Furthermore, they may show up in other sectors of human activity besides financial markets, such as in boasting or overconfidence and overestimation of perceived factors in decision-making by world leaders, which could lead to critical strategic errors. The number of new highs by global stock indices was less than the previous week. The German DAX remained strong, posting yet another new all-time high on March 14th at $18,039. The Zurich SMI soared to its highest level since May 2022, while the London FTSE made a new 9-month high. The Netherlands AEX failed to take out its all-time high made the prior week for a case of regional intermarket bearish divergence. In Asia and the Pacific Rim, India's Nifty made a new all-time high, but it was early in the week, after which it faded. The China and Hong Kong markets were strong, with each positing their highest marks since November. The Japanese Nikkei took a turn south, dropping 2,200-plus points from its all-time high of the previous week. Australia's ASX failed to take out its high of the prior week, though it tried, and then sold off into Friday, March 15th. No U.S. market made a new all-time high last week. The highs of March 8th in both the Nasdaq and the S&P remained intact. Each index, including the Dow Jones Industrial Average, made a secondary high mid-week, but closed down by Friday, suggesting weakness heading into next week. Silver was the star last week, continuing its surge up to $25.42 on Friday, its highest price since the last primary cycle crest of December 4th at $26.34 an ounce, and was in line with our call made in last week's monthly MMA cycles report. Gold, however, did not exceed its all-time high of $2,202 made the prior week on March 8th. Bitcoin made another new all-time high on Thursday, March 14th at $73,803. However, by Friday, one day later, it had dropped over $8,000 to $65,564. Crude oil had a good week, rallying to a high of $81.62 on Thursday, its highest price in 4 months. Now the short-term Geocosmics. Here is a quote from the Wall Street Journal on March 14th. Article entitled, Putin Rattles Nuclear Saber Ahead of Presidential Elections. Vladimir Putin warned publicly for the second time in less than 2 weeks of the possibility of nuclear confrontation with the West, a saber the Russian president is rattling with increasing frequency ahead of presidential elections this weekend. And how about a quote from John Fogerty and Creedence Clearwater Revival from Bad Moon Rising back in 1969? Don't go around tonight. Well, it's bound to take your life. There's a bad moon on the rise. And James Clavell, Shogun, 1975, only by living at the edge of death can you understand the indescribable joy of life. End quote. Ray says, we are on the edge of a very passive-aggressive collective mood for the next 3 weeks. The passivity is shown by the Sun conjunct Neptune on March 17th in Pisces. It is supported by the frozen Venus-Saturn conjunction, also in Pisces, on March 21st. In market speak, that means traders may want to believe the raging bull markets will continue, but now there is some doubt and confusion. They may choose to wait and see if voices such as the Fed will come out and reaffirm that short-term interest rates will be reduced, as they suggested a few days ago. This is in light of the fact that last week's inflation numbers showed a slight rise, and hence the pause in the market rallies, such as in stocks, gold, and Bitcoin. Our rule remains the same as given before. Any market declining into a hard Venus aspect, like we see on March 21st, is a candidate to buy. And once we pass through this fog of uncertainty, confusion, and passivity, or the paralysis to act, we head into the eclipse season, with the Sun, lunar north node, and Chiron all in the potentially combative and aggressive sign of Aries. It's another flip-the-script sequence. On top of that, Mercury will turn retrograde on April 1st, which means instead of flipping the script may flip-flop. Not much difference, except flip-flop means more confusion again. Financial markets could get rather rowdy and disorderly as we creep closer and closer to Jupiter conjoining Uranus on April 20th. It goes like this. First, there is a lunar eclipse on Monday, March 25th. Lunar eclipses are full moons that find the lunar nodes nearby to both the Sun and the Moon. Their quote-unquote influence prevails about 3 weeks before the eclipse and can continue approximately 3 months later in time. Being in Aries and Libra, this portends conflict between acts of aggression and strategies of diplomacy. Negotiations do have a chance at first. However, things could unravel quickly once Venus ends its conjunction with Neptune in Pisces on April 3rd and enters Aries on April 4th. By April 8th, one of the most powerful solar eclipses to darken a path across the United States will command awe and attention. Everyone will be asking, what does this event, these few minutes of total darkness, mean? In Aries, the nodes and Chiron are also nearby, which means there is a danger of harm. With Mars conjoining Saturn 2 days later, it can signify war threats or threats from nature, such as hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, or extreme heat or cold. With Pluto in Aquarius, it can be a threat of nuclear actions. Putin just rattled the saber again, just as we pointed out. Nuclear tensions could escalate when Pluto, threat to human lives, god of the underworld, went into Aquarius. And Putin confirmed his threat again last week, which should not be taken lightly. It doesn't mean he will definitely act on his threat, or that if he does, it will happen in April. A solar eclipse can continue its promise or threat for approximately 18 months afterwards, and it can start up to 3 months before. Different astrologers have different opinions on this, but Ray says that's his observation. Thus, it would be unwise to assume Putin will not act on this threat if he personally feels threatened. And with his natal Sun-Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Libra opposite this eclipse, he may be paranoid to the extent of having delusions of persecution. This may heighten his fear of threats and his acting upon them. We should be cognizant of this. The path of the April 8th eclipse will follow a trajectory from Mexico up through Texas into the Midwest Corn Belt and along the U.S.-Canadian border from Lake Erie up through Maine. Any country under the path of an eclipse is vulnerable to major changes in its leadership. It is vulnerable to a major reversal of its current policy initiatives. So what should we do? How should we approach this as individuals and in our own life? Understand that the symbolism is that of the moon, emotions, the past, blocking the path of the sun, the future. A new path is being birthed, which means any path tied to emotions of attachment has to be transcended. If things are not working out well in relationships, work, or health, this is the time to visualize and then initiate actions to form a new path. Allowing matters and thoughts that are unhealthy to persist will raise the possibility that changes will be forced upon one. Detachment from that which is familiar may not be simple if one does not accept or make changes voluntarily. Eclipses can be very Plutonian in the language of astrology. It may seem like a bad moon rising, but it need not be, especially as this eclipse is conjunct with the north node of the moon, as opposed to the moon's south node. The important lesson to apply is the choice to detach oneself from habits, activities, and emotions that are blocking one's future. If it isn't working, fix it or change it. And if it is working, don't break it. Just be patient if you believe in yourself and in your plans. And most of all, cause no harm for others. For with an eclipse like this, efforts to harm others could backfire in ways that are unexpected. Think of helping others and allowing them to help you. Mars, Saturn, and Pisces, as opposed to a paranoid feeling of a need to punish others based on an assumption that they are trying to harm you. And that wraps up this week's newsletter. Excellent comments from Ray. And just a reminder, if you have not picked up the 2024 forecast book from Ray Merriman, he goes into much more detail about the eclipses and the big Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in May. That is available both at MMAcycles.com and also HighTimelineBooks.com. For you market traders who are catching this on Saturday and you would like to sit in on an options workshop, that is happening today at 1 p.m., and there is a link to register right in the newsletter at MMAcycles.com. And if you want to keep a little bit of a closer watch on the markets from this perspective, also the Geocosmic Week in Review on YouTube is available on Wednesdays with Gianni DePoce. It comes out generally Wednesday evenings. Thank you guys so much for listening. We do appreciate it, and we will see you tomorrow night on Level Up for you fun astrology listeners, and back again on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody.